Hi, thanks for watching. Going to talk about the West Indies tour of India happening in November. A late scheduled tour for pretty cynical reasons to get Tendulkar his final test, as has now been revealed, will be his final test in Mumbai. Nevertheless, too many tests are being cancelled or rescheduled these days for me to complain. I'm glad to see more test matches being played, whatever the reason. It's a two-test series. We will talk about the Indians first. Obviously, most of the attention is focused around them, even more so now with Tendulkar going out. I wanted to also just mention that this is sort of broader implications than just Tendulkar's last test, in the sense that the last time these two teams played in India just 2 years ago, pretty much exactly 2 years ago, it was a great series. It was a really underrated series. The final test of that was probably one of the most underappreciated test matches of the last decade. Actually ended with scores level and India 9 wickets down. As a draw. As a draw. So an amazing finish to that match where the West Indies really rallied towards the end, taking 4 quick wickets. And this team is presumably probably a little bit better than the one that went to India then. They lost the series 2-0 in the three tests, but were very much competitive. Looking at the Indians, as I mentioned, Tendulkar, as I say, it's sort of funny how quickly this transformation of India's batting card has happened for ages and ages and ages, and so many of my previews from a year or two ago, you'll see me talking about just the need to get young players in, need to get young players in. And they just kept putting it off. Sehwag and Gambier played for way too long, particularly Gambier. Laxman played for far too long. Dravid didn't. He had a great series in England a couple of years ago and just had a poor series in Australia and then retired pretty much immediately. But nevertheless, a year ago this team was still playing Yuvraj and Laxman and Sehwag and Gambier. Now they're all gone. The only two returning bats from the West Indies series in 2011 are Virat Kohli and Sachin Tendulkar, and obviously Sachin Tendulkar won't be there after this. So after taking so long for it to actually happen, it sounds like India now have got this real verve to make things happen quickly, which is great. So you'll see Dhawan, obviously, and Pujara and Kohli, and maybe Rohit and maybe Rahane, who's the next big thing. So with that in mind, not a lot of numbers to take out from that series. However, I want to look at two of those young players, and I've talked about them before. One is Chechesh Pujara. Now, Pujara looks fantastic. I mean, I'm going to talk about Kohli in a second, and I love Kohli, and I think he's really going to come around and become maybe the best stroke maker and pure stroke maker in world cricket. But Chetesh Pujara was the guy who really impressed me against the Australians. In that he just looked great, looks right. Great players tend to look a certain way at the crease, and he certainly had that. Since being recalled in 2012, he had a little bit of a start earlier on that, but since being recalled in 2012, Pujara has had an average of 82.54 in those 10 Test matches, and they're all against top 8 opposition. There's no Bangladesh or Zimbabwe in there. 82.54 in 10 tests is a decent size. He's only scoring 35.3% of his innings, which is it's very good, but it doesn't match up with the 85 or 82 average. But he is scoring a century once every 4.3 innings, and tends to be big centuries. Those numbers there are very good, but they probably don't give the full impression of that 82 average. It's because he's scoring big centuries. This is a classical 3-4 player, a guy that can score a lot of runs. Big runs, first innings runs. Looks a superb player of slow bowling. We're going to talk about that in a second as well. And an incredibly technically competent player. Couldn't be more impressed, obviously, with Chechesh Pujara. And again, I suspect he'll continue his development prior to a big South Africa series. How many tests that's going to be, we don't know. But I actually think he's got a real chance to succeed in his first tour of South Africa. It's true all of his matches have been in Asia, fair enough. But I'm very excited about him. I think you should be too. Virat Kohli is another guy who's been around for a bit longer. Obviously dominated the one-day scene to a massive degree, to almost unprecedented degree. He's taken a little bit of a time to come through at the test level. I mean, I think a lot of people, me included, expected him to pretty much be great from the word go. That didn't really happen, but he is coming along. That's the good news, is he's coming along. And a lot of his really good scores I've noticed have actually been in causes where someone like Pujara or Murali Vijay against India has kind of dominated the innings. So he sort of made these relatively anonymous sort of 105s or 85s. He's actually younger than Sunil Narayan, who we'll talk about a bit later on. So that gives you some idea. Sunil Narayan sort of thought of as a really fresh-faced young thing. But Virat Kohli is actually younger than him. He'll turn 25 basically when the series starts. So he's still a very young player. Batting averages, look, in his first year he averaged 22.44, but his next year averaged 49.21. He's currently averaging 56.8. He has 4 centuries in the last 18 knocks, so that's a century rate that compares favourably with Pujara, for instance. And yeah, so he's coming along exactly the way he should be. Sometimes it hasn't quite been the revelatory performance that we've seen in his one international career, but he's doing very, very good. He actually played his first 4 tests against this opposition, against the West Indies, and they were poor tests. He only averaged 27.29. He didn't get a century, and scoring in 28.6% of his innings. So if we look at the 2011 series, Virat Kohli is a very different player now. And again, another player to really get excited about his development. And obviously Darwan and these other guys as well will be of interest. Look at the West Indies now. Darren Bravo, talking about young players, and it's a bit of a focus. These are two young teams. Darren Bravo, interesting case. It's sort of a bit like Kohli, been a bit of a disappointment, but there's a bit more reason to worry about Bravo. In in 2013, the 2 tests he's played this year, he's averaging only 6. Obviously, that's only 2 tests, but it's also from a 37.07 2012. So he's going in the wrong direction, basically, Darren Bravo. And I think I know I'm concerned about his development. He's a good-looking player, very good-looking player. And the West Indies really need him because their batting is much more fragile than their bowling side of things in terms of their young development. They really need Bravo to become a star of some description. The positive side of things is that he averages 70.66 in Asia, above 67 in both India and Sri Lanka. So again, that's not Bangladesh inflated numbers. After the final test of the 2011 series, his average was 52.5. So Bravo was left that series really as the talk of the town, and everyone was talking about him. As I say, since then things have gone relatively south. That's to be somewhat expected from a young player developing. There are going to be bumps in the road. But in that series we talked about in 2011, averaged 54.96, 33.3% score percentage, and got a century in the 6 innings he played. So another big series for Bravo, maybe bigger than most, because the pitches should be conducive to big runs. He plays well on these pitches historically. Perhaps this is the series where we go, is the problems with Darren Bravo just a bump in the road? That's the kind of thing that happens with young kids. Or is it, this guy's not what we thought he was? So from that perspective, even though it's just 2 tests, you'd really want to see some big numbers from Darren Bravo. The other young guy that everyone always looks at with the West Indies is Sunil Narine. I talked about him a little bit earlier on. He came off a series against Bangladesh. This is pretty amazing. A series against Bangladesh where Sunil Narine took 1.5 wickets per match at 114.33. Now, I know it was only a couple of tests, but no one of any quality should be averaging 114.33 with a ball against Bangladesh. And he also did not take a single specialist batsman's wicket. So he's not taking a wicket in the last 46 overs. Again, these are small sample sizes. He's a young kid, but again, these are concerning. Ryan really, when he had a delayed start to Test cricket, was 2020 marvel and had great first-class numbers. These signs are a little bit disturbing, and again, another important series. Maybe not quite as important as for Bravo, because Naran is still in a much more embryonic stage of his career, but important. And we'll want to see Naran also develop on tracks that help him a little bit. I'm always a bit wary of how much these Asian tracks actually help slow bowlers. I think it's much more of a batting thing, and the slow bowlers get involved because fast bowlers are so irrelevant. But you would still expect him to at least take a lot of wickets, even if they do cost some runs. I still want to see him taking 4 or 5 wickets a Test match. I think that's reasonable to assume. So again, an important test in his career development. Okay, so the pick. I think India will win this series 2-0. I think they'll win it handily. I think they're an exciting team. I think they're a better team than they were 2 years ago. West Indies probably are too, although their development hasn't been as linear as maybe some people might have thought when they had that last test against India, which was so exciting. There's more question marks there, and the question marks about Bravo and Narayan, maybe Kamara Roach to some degree, but these younger players, Craig Braithwaite, these kind of guys. They become louder and louder. Westies haven't really taken off in quite the way that people thought they would. Struggled at a bit times against Bangladesh. So I want to see those 2 guys play well. I don't really care whatever else West Indies do. I don't think they're going to win the series. I don't think they're going to come close to winning the series. They may get a draw, possibly. Again, that will rely on Bravo scoring lots of runs on a road. Anyway, they should win. Tendulkar's last test, he's had an amazing career. I'm not necessarily a massive fan of him personally, but it's 24 years worth. It's an amazing achievement, and you have to respect that. And India has every right to get a bit emotional about this, and I hope he has a great send-off. So yeah, look, thanks for watching. Soon we'll be talking about the Ashes, so stay tuned. Thanks.